Hey, it's comedian turned author Mike Lucas here with a quick breakdown of how to write a joke. First, you got to pick out a subject you want to talk about. For example, I have a teenage daughter who sleeps in well past noon on the weekends. That's called a premise. Its job is to get the audience thinking in a certain way. In this case, like a parent whose teenage daughter is oversleeping. On weekends, my teenage daughter sleeps in well past noon. The next part of the joke is where I set up the audience to start thinking that this story is going to go in a normal direction. But to get a laugh, it's not. To do that, I use something I call the comedy lens. That's like a metaphoric porthole I look through at the world to give my humor its originality, and it makes it more memorable and relatable. Side note, every great comic has a comedy lens. Jerry Seinfeld is the guy who makes a big deal out of nothing. Chris Rock is the racial satirist who's half rapper, half preacher. Steve Martin is the wild and crazy guy. Again, it's that comedy lens that makes a pro comic's humor relatable and memorable. For this joke, we'll use my comedy lens, which is the clumsy Aspie hole. Those of us who identify as being on the Asperger's spectrum tend to notice whatever's off about others, and we're willing and able and ready to point it out. But I'm clumsy on all levels, so that usually backfires. So for this teen oversleeping premise, my next job is to set the audience up to think that this little story of mine is going to end normally, like with my daughter getting in trouble and changing her lazy ways, which for an Aspie hole means I have to notice and notify, or interject and correct. Here's how I do that. On weekends, my teenage daughter sleeps in well past noon. That's not going to happen in my house. Now, to get a laugh, I have to heighten or exaggerate that in a way that the audience isn't expecting. Now, to do that, I'm going to use a humor heightening device called contrast. Contrast is where you compare two things comically, like they do it this way in Ohio, but they do it that way in Texas. Or men do it this way and women do it that way. Or cats are like this and dogs are like that. Here's how that looks for the teen sleeper premise. On weekends, my teenage daughter sleeps in well past noon. That's not going to happen in my house. So I told her, look, kid, in the olden days, even on weekends, you'd have to get up early to milk the cows and gather the eggs. And she's like, well, you know, Dad, in the olden days, life expectancy was 55 years old, so you'd already be dead. Right? And there's the laugh. I got the audience thinking of a normal outcome, that my daughter will see the wisdom of the point I'm making. Instead, using contrast, she overstates the obvious, which is that in my own scenario, I'd be dead. Then the audience laughs when they get that her unexpected answer still satisfies that setup. So to recap, to write a joke, first, pick a premise, then use your comedy lens to set up a normal and predicted outcome, and then finally, use the humor heightening devices to upset that norm in a way that still satisfies that setup. And that's the same game plan I break down in my new humor writing book, Finding Your Funny Muscle: How to Create Laughs Like a Pro, already an Amazon bestseller. Hope that helps.